I'm Mila, a 36-year-old woman living what I thought was a fairly ordinary life. I married my college sweetheart, Jack, a man who was once my rock. We didn't have kids, just the two of us and our dreams, living in a house that was finally ours, mortgage-free. This house was a symbol of our years together, bought on a mortgage that we aggressively paid down, especially after I used the inheritance from my dad to make the final payments. Our life was simple but content, or so I believed. Jack, tall and usually unflappable with his finance job, was my partner in everything. We had our share of arguments, like any couple, but I always felt we were a team. His parents, George and Martha, had become like my own. George, a burly, kind-hearted man with a booming laugh, and Martha, a gentle soul who had taken me under her wing from day one. Our relationship was one of mutual respect and affection. Tonight was supposed to be a small celebration, just George and us, marking the end of our mortgage payments. The house was warmly lit, and I had spent the day cooking George's favorite dishes. I remember glancing at the clock, noting Jack's unusual lateness. George arrived first, cheerful as always, but with an undercurrent of concern for his son's tardiness. We chatted in the kitchen, George regaling me with stories of his youth, his laughter filling the room. But as the night grew older, my anxiety crept in. Finally, the doorbell rang, and I rushed to open it, expecting Jack, maybe with a story of traffic or a last-minute work emergency. What I saw instead felt like a scene from a movie. Jack stood there, not alone, but with a young, stylish woman clinging to his arm. She had an air of confidence, almost defiance, as she scanned our home, her eyes lingering on the pictures of our life together on the walls. "Jack, what's going on?" I managed to get out, my voice a mix of confusion and rising anger. Jack looked different. His usual calm demeanor was replaced with a cold, almost cruel smirk. "This is Lana," he said nonchalantly, his grip on her waist possessive. "She's going to be my wife." The words hit me like a freight train. Wife? Jack, are you joking? What about us? Our life together? George, who had come to see what the commotion was about, looked as shocked as I felt. "Jack, son, what are you saying? Mila is your wife." Lana finally spoke, her voice sharp and businesslike. "Looks like a nice place. We'll probably change a few things once it's ours." Jack's next words felt surreal. "Mila, I want a divorce. It's time you left." I was stunned, my mind racing. "Divorce? Jack, we built this life together, and you want to throw it away for her?" George's face was red with anger and disbelief. "Jack, think about what you're doing. This is madness." Jack shrugged, dismissive. "My mind's made up. Start packing, Mila. This house isn't yours anymore." I stood there, rooted to the spot, as George took my arm. "Mila, let's go. You don't need to take this." We left the house, my home, a place filled with memories now tainted by betrayal. I spent the night at George and Martha's, their kindness a small comfort in the storm of my suddenly shattered life. I woke up in George and Martha's guest room, feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. The events of last night replayed in my mind, each detail a fresh jab of pain. I could hear George and Martha in the kitchen, their voices a low murmur. Dragging myself out of bed, I stumbled into the kitchen, where George was making coffee and Martha was setting the table. They both looked up as I entered, their faces a mix of concern and anger. "Morning, Mila," George said gruffly, handing me a cup of coffee. "Slept any?" "Not really," I replied, my voice hoarse. "Feels like a nightmare." Martha came over and gave me a hug. "That boy has lost his mind, Mila. You don't deserve this." I sipped the coffee, feeling its warmth but not much else. "I don't know what to do, Martha. My whole life just turned upside down." George slammed his cup on the table, his usual jovial demeanor gone. "We'll not let him get away with this, Mila. He can't just throw you out like yesterday's garbage." Martha nodded, her eyes fierce. You've put too much into that house, into that marriage. It's not right. I felt a surge of anger, thinking about Jack and Lana in my house. I paid for most of that house. My inheritance, my savings. George's eyes lit up. That's it. You have rights, Mila. That house is as much yours as it is his. Martha was quick to agree. Yes, you need to fight for what's yours. Don't let that woman take everything from you. I started to feel a fire building inside me, fueled by their support. You're right. I won't let Jack and his mistress walk all over me. George stood up, determination on his face. We'll get a lawyer, someone who can sort this mess out. You won't be alone in this, Mila. Martha squeezed my hand. We're with you, every step of the way. That boy needs a lesson on how to treat people. Sitting there with them, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I could get through this. But I knew it was going to be a long, hard fight. The morning at George and Martha's had stirred something in me, a sense of resolve I hadn't felt in a long time. I spent the day buried in financial records, piecing together every contribution I'd made towards our home. The dining table was littered with bank statements, mortgage documents, and old receipts, tangible proof of my investment in what was supposed to be our shared dream. George, sitting across from me, was meticulously going through each document. Look at this, Mila. You've paid more than half of the mortgage, and that's not even counting your inheritance. You have a strong claim to the house. I nodded, my fingers tracing the figures that represented years of my life. I'm going to call Jack. He needs to understand he can't just erase me from his life and take everything we built together. Martha, who had been brewing some coffee, set a cup in front of me. Be clear and stand your ground, Mila. He's used to walking all over you, but not this time. I dialed Jack's number. It rang twice before he picked up. Mila? What do you want? His voice was dismissive, cold. I took a deep breath, steadying my nerves. Jack, I've been looking over our finances. It turns out I've put more money into the house. My inheritance, my savings, it adds up to me owning 2/3 of the house. There was a brief silence on the line. You're joking, right? No, Jack. I'm dead serious. I've calculated it all. If you want to keep the house, you need to buy out my share. That's $266,000. I could almost hear his sneer through the phone. You think you can just demand money out of the blue? This isn't a demand, Jack. It's what I'm owed. It's fair. You can either pay me, or we sell the house and split the money. Your choice. Jack's voice was laced with annoyance. Fine, you'll get your money. But after this, we're done. I hung up, my heart racing. He agreed to pay, I said, half in shock. George was beaming with pride. You did good, Mila. Standing up to him like that. Martha came over and hugged me. I'm proud of you, Mila. You're taking control of your life again. That afternoon, as I sorted through more paperwork, George and Martha shared stories of their own struggles and triumphs, reminding me that resilience was a family trait. We discussed lawyers, next steps, and strategies, turning their kitchen into a war room of sorts. As evening fell, George cooked dinner, a simple stew that filled the house with a comforting aroma. We ate together, talking about everything but the situation at hand, giving me a much-needed break from the stress. The battle was far from over, but for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I felt like I wasn't facing it alone. With George and Martha's support, I had a fighting chance. And as I drifted off to sleep, I clung to that thought like a lifeline. The morning of the divorce proceedings, I walked into the lawyer's office with a steely resolve. The office was cold and sterile, the kind of place where futures were dismantled and rearranged. Jack entered, his face an emotionless mask. He wasn't alone, Lana, his mistress, was glued to his side. Her confidence seemed forced, a thin veneer over her uncertainty. I could feel their surprise as they saw me sitting there, calm and composed. Before Jack could even find his words, I cut to the chase. "I'm pregnant, Jack." Jack's eyes widened, his composure slipping. "What? Pregnant?" Lana's face twisted from confidence to confusion and then to rage. "You said you hadn't touched her in months. You lying jerk." I ignored her outburst and continued, "I'm asking for alimony, Jack. $800 a month, for the next 21 years. For our child." The lawyer, Mr. Harris, a middle-aged man with a stern face, nodded in approval. "Given the circumstances, Mrs. Smith's request is perfectly reasonable." Jack looked like he had been punched. "This is insane. You can't just spring this on me and expect me to pay up." I met his gaze squarely. "I can and I am. You made your bed, now lie in it. You owe this to our child, if not to me." Lana was fuming, her voice shrill with anger. "Jack, you can't do this. She's clearly trying to trap you." Jack, flustered and overwhelmed, ran a hand through his hair. I need time to think." Mr. Harris interjected, "Mr. Smith, the law is clear. You have a financial responsibility to your child." Jack slumped into the chair, defeated. "Fine," he muttered. "I'll pay the alimony." As they left, Lana was hissing into Jack's ear, her facade of poise completely shattered. I remained seated, feeling a mixture of triumph and sadness. This wasn't just about the money, it was about standing up for myself and my future child. In the following weeks, I worked with Mr. Harris to iron out the details. He was impressed with my resolve, often remarking on my newfound toughness. "You're not the same woman who walked into my office a month ago," he said during one of our meetings. I smiled, feeling a sense of empowerment. "I guess I'm not. I have someone else to think about now." As I left his office after signing the final papers, I felt a sense of closure. The battle was tough, but I had come out stronger. I was ready to face whatever came next, not just for me, but for my child as well. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a say in it. After the tumultuous divorce proceedings, I found an unexpected source of strength in Jack's parents, George and Martha. We sat in their cozy living room, a stark contrast to the cold lawyer's office, plotting our next move. George, always a man of action, was pacing the room. "We need to show that scoundrel he can't just trample over our family," he said, his voice tinged with anger. Martha, ever the strategist, added, "We've got to be smart about this. We can't just barge in there and make a scene." I nodded, feeling a mix of gratitude and determination. "I agree. But what can we do? He's made his bed with Lana." George stopped pacing and turned to me. "What if we visit them? Regularly. Make our presence felt. Remind Jack of the family he's turning his back on." Martha's eyes lit up. "Yes, and it'll drive that little homewrecker up the wall. She won't like us being around, reminding her of what she's done." I couldn't help but smile at their cunning plan. "You think it'll work? Make her uncomfortable?" George grinned. "Oh, I'm sure it will. We'll be the most annoying, ever-present in-laws. She won't know what hit her." Martha clapped her hands together. "We'll start tomorrow. A nice, long, unannounced visit." The next day, we executed our plan. George rang the doorbell of what used to be my home, a big smile plastered on his face as Jack opened the door. "Son. We thought we'd drop by. Spend some quality time together," George boomed, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Lana appeared behind Jack, her smile forced. "Oh, what a surprise. And what is she doing here?" Martha breezed past her, adding, "She's with us. We just couldn't stay away. It's been too long." We spent hours there, talking loudly, laughing, and reminiscing about old times, pointedly ignoring Lana's growing discomfort. Every time she tried to interject or change the subject, George or Martha skillfully steered the conversation back. As we left, Lana's frustration was evident. She was fuming, barely managing a fake smile. In the car, Martha chuckled. "Did you see her face? She was about to explode." George was laughing too. "We're just getting started. That girl has no idea what she's in for." I sat in the back seat, a sense of satisfaction washing over me. It was a small, petty victory, but after everything that had happened, it felt good to take some control back, to push back against the injustice of it all. With George and Martha by my side, I felt stronger, ready to face whatever came next. A few weeks after our in-law intervention strategy began, I received unexpected news from Martha during one of our coffee chats. "Mila, you won't believe it. Jack's put the house up for sale," she said, her voice a mix of shock and satisfaction. I almost choked on my coffee. "What? Why would he do that?" Martha shrugged. "Seems like Lana can't stand us being around. She's pushing him to move." I pondered the situation, an idea slowly forming in my mind. "Martha, what if I bought the house back?" George, who had been quietly reading the newspaper, looked up. "Buy it back? You think that's a good idea?" I nodded. "Yes, but at a lower price. Jack's desperate, and I have the money from the settlement. It's perfect." Martha smiled slyly. That would be quite the turn of events. Imagine Lana's face if she knew. I contacted a realtor friend, explaining the situation and my plan. She agreed to help, ensuring my identity remained hidden during the negotiations. A week later, I sat with my realtor friend, discussing our strategy. Jack's asking for a high price, but we know he's desperate. "Let's lowball him." My realtor nodded. "I'll start the negotiations. He won't know it's you until the deal is sealed." The negotiations went back and forth for days. Finally, Jack caved, accepting a much lower offer than his initial asking price. My realtor friend called me with the news. "We got it, Mila." "He accepted the offer," she said, barely containing her excitement. I couldn't help but laugh. "I can't believe it. I'm buying my house back." The day we closed the deal, I met my realtor at the office. "You're now the proud owner of your old house," she said, handing me the keys. The day I reclaimed my house was a day of triumph. I stood outside the familiar front door, the weight of the keys in my hands symbolizing so much more than mere ownership. My heart pounded with a mix of excitement and apprehension as I prepared to face Jack and Lana one last time in what was once our shared home. Unlocking the door, I stepped inside. The sight of Jack and Lana, surrounded by boxes in the midst of packing, brought a sense of surreal finality. They both looked up, shock and disbelief etched on their faces. "What the hell, Mila? How did you get in here?" Jack's voice was a mixture of anger and confusion. I couldn't help but smirk. "Oh, didn't you hear? I'm the new owner." "Surprise!" Lana's face turned a shade of red, her eyes wide in shock. "You? This has to be some kind of sick joke." Crossing my arms, I leaned against the door frame. "No joke, Lana. I bought the house. It's mine now, and you two are trespassing." Jack's face contorted with anger. "This is low, even for you, Mila. You think you can just waltz back in here and take over?" I straightened up, my voice firm and unwavering. "Yes, Jack, that's exactly what I'm doing. You wanted me out, and now I'm back. My house, my rules. Time for you to leave." Lana, fuming, spat out, "You can't do this. We have rights." I walked into the living room, standing my ground. "The only right you have right now is to walk out of my house. I suggest you do it quickly." Jack, realizing the futility of arguing, began to gather his belongings. Lana followed suit, her movements jerky with frustration. As they left, Lana hissed at me, "You haven't won anything, Mila." Watching them leave, I felt a surge of empowerment. This house, which had witnessed the rise and fall of my marriage, was now a symbol of my resilience. It was a battleground where I had emerged victorious. After the door closed behind them, I walked through the empty rooms. Each space echoed with memories, both good and bad, but now it was time to make new ones. I envisioned the house filled with laughter and love once more, a sanctuary for me and my future child. Sitting down in the quiet living room, I allowed myself a moment to take it all in. I had come full circle, but this time, I was in control, a victor reclaiming her kingdom. The journey had been fraught with pain and betrayal, but it had led me to this moment of triumph. My house, my rules, my life. I was ready to start anew, stronger and more determined than ever. One afternoon, as I was arranging the nursery for my soon-to-arrive baby, there was a knock on the door. I opened it to find George and Martha, beaming with smiles. "Mila, dear, how are you holding up?" Martha asked as she stepped inside, her eyes taking in the changes I'd made. "I'm doing well, Martha." "Getting ready for the baby," I replied, leading them into the living room. George, carrying a bag of baby clothes, chuckled. "This little one is going to be spoiled rotten by us, you know that, right?" I laughed, the sound bright and genuine. I wouldn't have it any other way. As we sat, chatting and laughing, another knock came at the door. This time, it was Jack. He looked different, worn out, a little defeated. "Can we talk, Mila?" Jack's voice was low, lacking its usual confidence. I hesitated but nodded, stepping outside to talk to him privately. I messed up, Mila," Jack started, not meeting my eyes. "Lana left me. I'm broke, and I was hoping." I cut him off, my voice steady. "Hoping for what, Jack? For me to take you back? After everything?" Jack's face crumpled. "I know I don't deserve it, but I have nowhere else to go." I looked at him, the man I once loved, now just a stranger filled with regrets. "Jack, I've moved on. I'm starting a new life, for me and my baby. You need to do the same." He nodded slowly, the reality of the situation sinking in. "I understand. I'm sorry, Mila." As he walked away, I felt a closure I didn't know I needed. Turning back to the house, I saw George and Martha watching through the window, their expressions a mix of concern and support. "He won't bother you again, will he?" George asked as I walked back in. I shook my head. "No, he won't. I made it clear." Martha hugged me. "You're so strong, Mila. We're so proud of you." Sitting back down, surrounded by the people who had become my true family, I felt a sense of peace. The journey had been long and fraught with pain, but it had led me here, to a place of strength and new beginnings. The future was uncertain, but it was mine to shape, and I looked forward to every moment of it.